The air in the room freezes around him. He's standing there, under the harsh glare of the stock ticker flashing on the wall behind me, his face a mask I've never seen before, a twisted caricature of disbelief and horror. My hand, the one holding the champagne glass, is trembling so violently I almost drop it. The sound ringing in my ears isn't the celebratory roar of the crowd. It's the silent echo of his voice, his words, those casual, cruel words that have lived inside my head for years.
He's swaying.
His eyes are fixed on the screen, on the numbers that just keep climbing, zeros adding themselves like cruel jokes. They are climbing past the point of reason, past belief, past him. And then, just as I knew he would, just as I have fantasized about 1,000,000 times in the lonely, dark hours, he makes a sound like air being punched out of lungs, and his knees buckle. He doesn't just collapse, he implodes, a suit and tie crumpling to the floor in a heap of shattered arrogance. The sound he makes is a wet, choked gasp. It is the sound of a world ending. His world. And I just stand there, glass shaking, watching the ticker climb, watching him on the floor, and the only thing I feel is the cold, hard vindication that has been building inside me, stone by heavy stone, for so long. If you've ever felt like someone underestimated you completely, told me about it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life before was a low hum. It wasn't bad, not on the surface. It was comfortable. There was the big house, the manicured lawn, the dinners with the right people where everyone smiled and talked about growth and market share. I was the quiet one at the edge of the room, the supportive wife, the elegant accessory. My days were a blur of managing the perfect life, coordinating schedules, overseeing renovations, hosting events. It was a life built around him, around his career, his ambition, his ever-expanding world. My desires? They were small, faded things, tucked away like old photographs you rarely look at. I had studied design once. I had ideas once. But they felt frivolous against the solid, important reality of his success. He was building an empire, brick by careful brick. I was managing the estate. It felt like a fair trade, back then. Security, comfort, a place in society. That was enough, wasn't it? Everyone said so. My mother certainly thought so. His colleagues always praised me for being so grounded, so calm, such a rock for him. A rock. Unmoving, unchanging, useful only for providing stability. He was always busy. Phone calls at all hours, transatlantic flights, late nights at the office. When he was home, his mind was often elsewhere, already calculating the next deal, the next acquisition. Conversation was usually about his day, his challenges, his triumphs. My contributions were minimal, mostly questions designed to draw him out, affirmations to boost his ego. Sometimes, late at night after a glass or two of wine, I'd try to talk about something else. An idea I had, a book I read, a thought about the future. He'd listen, but his eyes would glaze over, or he'd nod absently, already formulating his response, which usually involved explaining why my idea wasn't practical, wasn't scalable, wasn't real business. He was the expert. He was the one with the vision. I was just me, living this quiet, pleasant life he provided. The words came on a Tuesday. I remember the day vividly. The sky was a perfect, cloudless blue, the kind of day that feels full of possibility. I had just finished arranging a new set of antique books in the library. It was a small thing, but it felt like my project, something I had chosen and executed myself. I felt a little spark of satisfaction. He came home early that day, stressed about something that had happened at the office. A junior executive had questioned one of his decisions. Insubordination, he called it. He was pacing the living room, loosening his tie, venting his frustration. I tried to offer a perspective, something I had read about managing teams, about fostering loyalty. It was a tentative suggestion, fragile as spun glass. He stopped pacing. He turned and looked at me, really looked at me, with an expression that wasn't anger, but something far colder. Dismissiveness.
Pity even.
He wasn't seeing me. He was seeing a part of the furniture that had suddenly started talking. You know, he said, his voice calm, deliberate, cutting, you have no idea how this world works. You live a very nice life, a very protected life. Because of me. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, but I pushed back slightly. I understand more than you think, I said softly. I manage a complex household. I handle investments. He laughed. Not a warm laugh. A sharp, dry sound, like stones grating together. Manage what I provide, he corrected. He walked closer, his eyes holding mine. And then he delivered the line that changed everything. The line that was a catalyst, a poison, a wake-up call. Let's be honest, he said, his voice dropping slightly, confidential, utterly condescending. You're powerless without me. You have no real skills the market values. No network of your own.
No capital.
Nothing. You exist because I allow you to exist like this. You are utterly, completely powerless without me. He said it like a simple statement of fact, like telling me the sky was blue. No malice, just truth as he saw it. A truth so absolute in his mind that it required no further discussion. He turned away then, grabbing a drink, the tension from his workday apparently released by this small, casual demolition of my existence. He had probably forgotten the conversation within minutes. I stood there, rooted to the spot, powerless. Without him, the words didn't just echo in my ears. They vibrated through my bones, settling deep in my gut like a heavy stone. He was right, wasn't he? On paper, he was absolutely, undeniably right. Every comfort, every security, every luxury I had came from him. My identity was tied to being his wife. If that tie was cut, what was left? A woman approaching 40, no recent work history, skills that felt antiquated and irrelevant, a network of friends built entirely through him. The truth of his statement was a physical blow. It knocked the air out of me. It left me feeling exposed, vulnerable, nothing. The first few weeks after he said it were the worst. His words were a constant hum in the background of my thoughts, a bitter soundtrack to my perfect life. I looked at my hands, the hands that arranged flowers and signed checks, and saw only uselessness. I tried to engage in conversations at parties, but his voice was in my head, telling me I had nothing valuable to contribute. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, a passenger with no control over the destination. The golden cage suddenly felt very small, and the bars felt very real. I considered trying to prove him wrong on his terms. Maybe I could get a job? But where? Doing what? Every job description I looked at seemed to require experience I didn't have, skills I hadn't used in decades. The thought of starting from scratch, of competing with people half my age, felt daunting, humiliating. What if I failed? Wouldn't that just prove him right? The fear was paralyzing. I tried talking to him, tried to explain how his words had hurt me, how they made me feel. He was dismissive again. Don't be so sensitive, he'd say. It's just reality. It's not a criticism, it's a fact. It should make you appreciate what you have, appreciate my gilded powerlessness. The conversation always circled back to his perspective, his reality. There was no room for mine. It was like talking to a wall built of money and ego. I felt an intense pressure to do something, but I didn't know what. I started trying to take online courses, thinking I could reskill. But I couldn't focus. The sheer weight of his contempt, internalized, made everything feel pointless. Why bother? He was right. I was powerless. This wasn't just about proving him wrong anymore. It was about finding a way to breathe again, a way to feel solid in a world that his words had liquefied. I was floundering, grasping at straws, sinking deeper into despair. The casual cruelty of his truth was slowly suffocating me. I was losing myself in the echo of his confidence in my insignificance. It was a quiet internal death. The comfortable life he provided was turning into a tomb of my own making, sealed by his pronouncement. Then a shift. It wasn't sudden, not a flash of lightning, more like the slow turning of a massive ship. I was sitting in the library one afternoon, the sun streaming through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I was supposed to be researching something for an upcoming charity event, but my mind was circling the usual drain of self-pity and resentment. I picked up a book, an old design retrospective. As I flipped through the pages, looking at the bold, confident lines, the innovative forms, something clicked. It wasn't about getting a job in his world. It wasn't about fitting myself into a pre-existing structure. It was about creating something. Something that was mine. The idea wasn't new. It had been a seed planted years ago, back when I first studied design, back when I thought I might pursue it professionally. It was about bridging the gap between high-end craftsmanship and accessible, sustainable products. A platform that connected independent artisans with a market that valued quality and ethics, using technology to streamline the process. It felt impossible then, a naive dream. But looking at the designs in the book, feeling a flicker of that old passion, the impossibility felt less like a barrier and more like a challenge. His words came back to me. No real skills the market values. No network of your own. No capital. Each phrase became a target. My design background? That was a real skill. My network? It was tangential to his world, yes, but I knew people, talented people, people with connections in different spheres. Capital? That was the biggest hurdle. But maybe there were other ways. Maybe I didn't need his money. Maybe I could find my own. The turning point was less about confrontation and more about redirection. I stopped trying to make him see me, hear me, validate me. I started focusing that energy inward. I started sketching again, late at night after he was asleep. I started researching, not job listings, but market trends, supply chains, e-commerce platforms. I started reaching out, tentatively at first, to old contacts from my design days, to people I knew casually who were involved in tech or retail. I didn't tell him what I was doing. It felt like a small, fragile rebellion, something precious that needed to be hidden away from his dismissive gaze. His opinion no longer mattered. What mattered was this tiny spark of possibility I felt flickering to life inside me. I wasn't trying to prove him wrong to him anymore. I was trying to prove myself right to myself. And that felt like the first breath of fresh air I'd taken in years. The powerlessness wasn't a cage he built. It was a state of mind I had let myself fall into. And now I was going to climb out, brick by painstaking brick. Building it was like trying to climb a mountain with your bare hands. Every day was a struggle. I worked from the smallest corner of the house, a space I turned into a makeshift office, hidden away. I taught myself how to build a basic website, how to navigate online payment systems, how to write a business plan. It was slow, frustrating work. There were days I felt completely overwhelmed, days I thought he was right, I can't do this. I'd stare at the screen, the lines of code blurring, the financial projections looking like gibberish, and the weight of his pronouncement would press down on me, heavy and suffocating. Funding was the first major hurdle. My personal savings were minimal. Asking him was out of the question, not just because I wanted to do this independently, but because the moment I asked for capital, he would know. And I couldn't risk his scorn, his inevitable "I told you so" if I failed. I spent months pitching to angel investors, to venture capitalists. Rejection became a familiar ache. My idea was too niche, they said. I lacked experience, they said. The market wasn't ready, they said. Each rejection felt like a confirmation of his words. Powerless. Without him. I learned to pitch differently. I learned to project confidence I didn't always feel. I honed my story, emphasizing the passion, the unique market position, the potential for impact. I finally secured a small seed round, enough to build a prototype platform and bring on a tiny, dedicated team, 2 young, brilliant developers and a marketing intern who believed in the vision as much as I did. We worked punishing hours, fueled by cheap coffee and sheer determination. I was learning constantly, making mistakes, course-correcting, pushing forward. My elegant, comfortable life became a backdrop to a relentless grind. Late nights coding, early mornings sourcing materials, weekends spent packing orders ourselves from a small rented storage unit. He noticed I was busy, of course, but he didn't know with what. I'd say I was working on a personal project, or helping a friend with something. He didn't pry. Why would he? In his mind, I was harmless, occupied with something trivial. He'd occasionally make a comment about me being very focused lately, a hint of amusement in his voice, as if I was engrossed in a complicated jigsaw puzzle. He never suspected it was a blueprint. The business grew slowly at first. Every small win felt monumental. Our first sale, our first positive customer review, our first artisan partner signing up. But with growth came bigger challenges. Scaling production, managing inventory, competing with larger, established players. The initial funding ran out faster than expected. We needed more capital to grow, to expand the team, to reach a wider market. This was the deepening crisis. The pressure mounted. My team was relying on me. The artisans who had trusted me were relying on me. And the fear of failure, the fear of proving him right, became an almost unbearable weight. There were nights I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling, the numbers swimming in my head, the possibility of everything collapsing feeling terrifyingly real. I considered giving up, walking away, going back to the comfortable nullity of my old life. It would be easier, less stressful, less likely to end in public, humiliating failure. One particularly bad day, a major deal fell through, a partnership that was crucial for our next phase of growth. I sat in my office, the small, cluttered space that had become my sanctuary and my prison, and felt the familiar cold dread wash over me. It was over. I had tried, and I had failed, just as he knew I would. The thought was a bitter poison. I could almost hear his voice, smug and knowing. That night, he came home particularly late. He was expansive, talking about a massive deal his company had just closed, the kind of deal that makes headlines. He was riding high, oblivious to my internal turmoil. He walked into the living room, where I was sitting, trying to look composed, and poured himself a drink. He looked at me, a faint smile on his face. "Long day?" he asked, not really waiting for an answer. "This is the kind of day you live for," he mused, swirling the ice in his glass. "The kind of deal that moves mountains. That changes everything." He paused, looking around the room, at the life he had built, the life he provided. "It's good to be in control," he said, almost to himself, but loud enough for me to hear. "Good to have that kind of power." And in that moment, something snapped inside me. It wasn't just resentment anymore. It was a fierce, burning rejection of everything he stood for, everything he believed about power, about control, about me. He saw power only in terms of dominance, in moving mountains he owned. He saw my life, my quiet efforts, as the opposite of power. He still, after all this time, after all my hidden struggle, saw me as utterly powerless, because my world wasn't built on his terms. But my world was being built. In secret, yes, but it was real. It was growing. It was connecting people, creating value, building something meaningful brick by painstaking brick. My mountain wasn't one of corporate mergers and acquisitions. It was one of community, creativity, and quiet resilience. And in that moment, hearing him talk about his power, his control, his mountains, I realized my strength wasn't in competing on his battlefield. It was in building my own, on ground he didn't even know existed. I looked at him, standing there, confident and self-satisfied, and I knew I couldn't give up.
Not now.
Not ever. This wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about defining power on my own terms. It was about proving, not to him, but to myself, that his definition was small, limited, and ultimately irrelevant to my capacity to create, to build, to thrive. That quiet evening, while he celebrated his latest conquest, I made my decision. I wouldn't just keep going. I would push harder. I would aim higher. I would take my little mountain and make it undeniable. And I would do it in plain sight on my own terms for my own reasons. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, exhilarating sense of purpose. I would not be powerless. Not anymore. The decision to go for an IPO felt audacious, reckless. It was a leap of faith, a sprint towards a finish line that was constantly receding. But staying private meant staying small, limited. Going public meant access to the capital we needed to truly scale, to make the impact I dreamed of. It also meant exposure. It meant the world, including his world, would see exactly what I had been building in the shadows. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. The process was a blur of meetings, roadshows, due diligence, and endless legal documents. It was more intense, more demanding than anything I had ever done. There were moments I thought I would break. The stress was immense. The stakes felt impossibly high. My life was a constant negotiation between managing the intricate details of the IPO process and maintaining the facade of my normal life with him. He still had no idea. He saw the late nights, the travel, but I attributed it to board positions I held, to vague consulting work. He accepted it without question. His lack of curiosity was its own form of contempt. Why would she be doing anything important? As the IPO date approached, the tension ratcheted up. The market was volatile. There were whispers of doubt from analysts. My team was exhausted, running on pure adrenaline. I felt the weight of all their hopes, all their sacrifices, on my shoulders. This wasn't just my dream anymore. It was theirs too. It was the artisans' livelihoods. It was a promise of a different kind of business, one built on different values. The day itself dawned crisp and clear. I arrived at the stock exchange building early, the city buzzing around me. The air inside was electric, a mix of nervous energy and anticipation. My team was there, looking incredibly young and incredibly determined. My small group of early investors were there, their faces a mixture of hope and anxiety. My parents were there, looking proud but clearly bewildered by the chaos. He was there too. He had agreed to come, seeing it as a quaint, slightly embarrassing obligation to support his wife's little project's public listing. He probably expected it to be a small, regional exchange listing, a quiet debut that might generate a few $1 million, a nice story for the society pages. He was there to play the supportive husband, to smile and nod, to perhaps make a small, patronizing speech about how proud he was of my initiative. He was utterly, blissfully unaware of the scale of what was about to happen. We gathered on the trading floor, the huge screens overhead displaying market data. My heart was pounding, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. The moments leading up to the opening bell stretched into an eternity. I stood surrounded by my team, holding their hands, offering quiet words of encouragement. I barely felt myself. And then the bell rang. The initial price was announced. It was higher than the most optimistic projections. A cheer went up from my team, from our investors. But it was just the start. We watched, mesmerized, as the numbers on the screen began to move.
Up.
They just kept going up. The trading floor became a frenzy of activity. Phones ringing, people shouting, the energy surging. Every tick upwards was a shock, a wave washing over me. My startup, born in secret in a corner of my house, was flying. And then, the unthinkable happened. It wasn't just climbing steadily. It surged. It tripled. Not just the offering price, but it soared past any reasonable expectation. The screens flashed, the numbers exploding upwards. The valuation, it was staggering. It wasn't just successful. It was a phenomenon. It was breaking records. And that's when I saw him. He was standing a little apart, near the edge of the crowd, his phone in his hand.
He wasn't looking at me.
He was looking at the screen, at the ticker for my company. His expression shifted from polite interest to confusion, then to dawning horror. He must have been tracking the valuation, doing the quick calculations in his head. His company was large, established, powerful. It was his life's work. Its valuation was a source of immense pride, a symbol of his power, his success, his very identity. The numbers on the screen kept climbing. And they climbed past his company's valuation. Not in some projected future, not over time. Right there, in that moment. Overnight. My little startup, the personal project he never took seriously, built on the skills he said were valueless, with the capital he said I didn't have, had just surpassed the monetary worth of his entire empire. His life's work, eclipsed by my quiet rebellion. The sound he made then was unmistakable. A strangled gasp, loud enough to cut through the din of the trading floor for me. His face went ashen. He swayed again, his eyes wide and fixed on the screen, as if the numbers were a physical blow. And then his knees buckled. He crumpled to the floor, a heap of expensive fabric and utter defeat. The champagne glass slipped from my trembling hand, shattering on the floor, but I barely noticed. All I could see was him, on the floor, defeated not by a competitor in his world, but by a force he never even knew existed until it steamrolled him. He had called me powerless without him. In proving him wrong, I had not only found my own power, I had inadvertently become the instrument of his public, spectacular collapse. The plot twist wasn't some external event. It was the simple, devastating reality that the woman he dismissed as powerless had built something that, in a single morning, had become financially more powerful than him. He lay there for a moment, then struggled to push himself up, leaning against a railing, his face slick with sweat, eyes darting wildly. The noise of the trading floor felt miles away. My team was still celebrating, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding just yards away. He looked at me then, his eyes meeting mine across the space. In them, I saw not just shock, but a profound, shattering realization. He saw not the supportive wife, not the quiet accessory, but the architect of this moment. He saw the power he had denied existed, and he saw that it had brought him to his knees. There were no words exchanged between us then. None were needed. The screens flashing overhead, his crumpled form, the triumphant roar of the crowd, it all spoke volumes. He stumbled away then, disappearing into the throng, his usual confident stride replaced by a broken shuffle. I heard later he had some kind of episode stress-induced. He was taken to the hospital. His company's stock dipped slightly on the news, a tiny ripple compared to the tsunami my own had generated. The aftermath wasn't the triumphant dance I might have imagined in my darker moments. There was a wave of elation, yes, a surge of vindication so powerful it almost brought me to my own knees. I had done it. I had built something real, valuable, impactful. I had proven him wrong, not with words, but with undeniable results. But underneath the elation, there was a strange sense of emptiness. The goal I had been striving for, the quiet, burning need to reclaim my power, had been achieved. But the cost felt heavy. The marriage, already a fragile shell, was irrevocably broken. He never spoke to me again after that day, not directly. Communication went through lawyers. The divorce was swift, clinical. There was no fight over assets. My own were now vastly greater than his. He was, ironically, the one who ended up with less after the division. The feeling wasn't triumph over a fallen enemy. It was more complex. Relief, yes, a profound sense of freedom. Sadness, too, for the years lost, for the person I had tried to be, and the person he had refused to see. The quiet life I had known was gone, replaced by a whirlwind of media attention, board meetings, and the demands of leading a rapidly growing company. I was no longer the quiet woman in the background. I was the founder, the CEO, a figure in the business world I had built. His words, "You're powerless without me," still echo sometimes, but they no longer sting. They are a reminder of how far I've come, how much I've overcome. They are a testament to the fact that true power doesn't come from being given something, or from controlling others. It comes from within, from resilience, from building your own world, brick by painful, glorious brick. My startup isn't just a company. It's a monument to quiet strength, to underestimated potential, to the power of creating your own value when someone else tells you you have none. It's a place where artisans thrive, where ethical production is valued, where community matters. It's everything he said I couldn't build. And it stands, solid and vibrant, a testament to the fact that the greatest power is the one you find when you're told you have none. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you had to prove yourself when someone doubted you, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.